here on Indiana University. And I want to extend a big thank you for everyone for tuning in today for our panel about exploring librarianship as a profession. So we do have a group of great panelists and moderator today, and it is my privilege to be able to introduce the moderator. But first, I have a couple very quick announcements. One, we are recording the session today. So please, if you could, for bandwidth and so forth, if you are not presenting and you're here as a guest observer, leave your cameras off today, and we will be posting this later on our Global Center YouTube channel for later reference. So thank you for everyone for letting us record that today, and we will be doing that. Because of that, also, please use the Q&A function for questions to the panelists instead of the chat feature. So please use the Q&A. That will let us manage those questions in the last bit of the session today. So we'll be using that as well. And here we are. Let's get started. Big thank you to our librarians and for coming in today and sharing us about the profession of librarianship. We have a great group of panelists today coming from a variety of institution types. And this event today is co-sponsored by the Indiana University Libraries Bloomington and the Center for the Study of Global Change. And a big thank you to the Associate Director, Selena Jaffe, here at the Global Center, and the International Studies Librarian, Charmaine Henriquez, for organizing this, putting the panels together, doing the logistics, and the other Global Center and librarian staff and faculty for this. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to our moderator today. Dr. Charles Sutton is an assistant professor in the Department of Library and Information Sciences at the Leddy School of Informatics at the Indiana University Indianapolis campus. Prior to his time at IU, Dr. Sutton worked for over 15 years in public libraries. So I'll turn it over to you and we'll get started today. Thanks again for everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Eli, and welcome to the Exploring Librarianship as a Profession. The event is 1 hour and 30 minutes. It'll be 1 hour for the panelists to answer questions and 30 minutes for audience questions. There are 6 panelist questions, and in order to conserve time, the first question will be answered by all panelists, and thereafter 2 panelists each will answer the remaining questions. As a reminder, questions from you, the audience, should be put in the question and answer box. We are video recording this, and so you can leave your cameras off during the time today. And if you do have questions, just put them in the question and answer box. And then also the chat boxes should be used for commentary. So if you want to make any comments, please place those in the chat boxes. So I'll now introduce our panelists. Ms. Karen Stoll-Farrell, Director of Scholarly Communication and Open Publishing, the Herman B. Wells Library at Indiana University. Karen holds a BA in Anthropology from Kalamazoo College, a MA in South Asian Studies from the University of Pennsylvania, and an MLIS from Wayne State University. She has also served as the interim head of Scholars Commons, head of the Area Studies Department, and the librarian for South Asian Studies and Southeast Asian Studies at IU Libraries, where she developed a world-renowned collection of South Asian film. Karen is the current president of the Bloomington Library Faculty Council at IU Bloomington and is co-editing the book Autistic Academic Librarians, A Guide for Success, to be published by the Association of College and Research Libraries. Esmeralda Kale, George and Mary Lacron Foster Curator, Melville J. Herkovitz, Library of African Studies, Northwestern University. Esmeralda holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from Trent University, Ottawa, a diploma in business administration from the University of Ottawa, a graduate diploma in library science from Concordia University, Montreal, and an MA and graduate diploma in library and information science from University College London. She began her career at Northwestern University Libraries as the bibliographer of Africana. She has also been the head of periodicals, gifts, and exchange at the University of Swaziland. Swaziland is now Eswatini. She's been the systems librarian at Rhodes University in South Africa, the acting head of the Department of Library and Information Science at the University of Fort Hare, Nelson Mandela's alma mater in South Africa, and reference librarian at Zayed University, Abu Dhabi, United Emirates. Miss Meredith Knopf, co-curricular research and engagement librarian, Herman B. Wells Library, Indiana University. Meredith manages the Learning Commons Research Desk, an interdisciplinary research assistance service that works with students at any stage of their research. She also develops services to meet students' co-curricular information needs and works with campus partners to support students' research interests by developing collaborative services. Meredith received a BA in English with a history minor from Lake Forest College and an MSLIS from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Prior to joining IU Libraries, she was the information literacy librarian at Misericordia University. And last but not least, Miss Catherine Morse, Government Information Law and Political Science Librarian and Collection Coordinator, Clark Library, University of Michigan. Catherine earned a BA in History from Northwestern University and an MLIS from Dominican University. She was previously the International Documents Librarian at Northwestern University. She has been a longtime member of the American Library Association Government Documents Roundtable and is an active member of the Association of College and Research Libraries Politics, Policy, and International Relations section. One of her current professional interests is web archiving. She is a curator for 2 archived web collections. One, Water Politics in Michigan, which attempts to capture the dialogue about access to clean water that's taking place on websites and social media between government officials and community organizations in Michigan. And 2, State Policies on Book Challenges in Schools and Libraries, which aims to collect both policies and contextual sources surrounding those policies. As I ask the first question for all of our panelists, let's welcome them with some emojis and just some send up some claps and hands and hearts, and if you can. Yeah, there you go, some celebrations. Thank you. So the first question is for everyone, all of our panelists. Please tell us about your journey to librarianship, what drew you to it, and can you give a brief description of what you currently do?
There we are. Oh, oops, no.
Okay, Meredith, you go first. Sorry, thank you. It was not letting me unmute myself. All right, so I had an early start in libraries. I was a library page when I was 16 at my local public library. So I like to tell people that if I knew I was picking my career at 16, I might have given it more thought. And then after I graduated from undergrad, it was 2011 and a really great time to be a recent college graduate. So I actually ended up back at the public library where I had worked in a pre-professional position. It was called Library Associate, and I was in that job for about 2.5 years, at which point I was feeling very connected to the job, felt like I was getting a lot of really good work done, and that's what moved me to my graduate program. And I initially thought that I would be going into special collections and archives, but at UIUC, I was working in an assistantship position with a undergrad instruction program where I was doing a lot of instruction and research work. And that really, I think, connected with me, felt like I was making a difference. I enjoyed getting to work with students and seeing how they learned and grew throughout their time as students, and also how they interacted with me. In my current position, I focus a lot on undergraduate research needs and interdisciplinary services. So the research desk that I manage helps students at any stage of their research process, across the entire process itself. So creating a research plan, actually identifying things, learning how to search for sources, and then all the way through evaluating. Personally, I research a lot of research motivations, as well as library approaches to service development and training methods.
I can go next. Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine. The way I got started is I had a work study job when I was an undergraduate student in a library. And so I sat at a service desk, and that was my first experience kind of like helping people like with whatever questions they may have in a library, and I enjoyed that. Um, After I graduated, I started working at a legal publishing company, and one of my responsibilities was answering questions if the customers happened to contact the publisher and ask about like the history of a particular law or regulation or something. And so I discovered that that was like my favorite part of the job. I really loved that part. So that got me thinking again about working in libraries. And so that's when I got a job in a library, and then decided to make it a career. What I do now as a librarian, I'm the Government Information Law and Political Science librarian at the University of Michigan. And so I'm in charge of the U.S. federal government documents collection, which includes um, millions of things we've received for more than 100 years. It's a really big collection of stuff. And I'm also the liaison to the political science department. So most of my time is spent really helping people do kind of policy questions, policy research, legal research, and finding data. Yeah, thanks.
I can go. So I'm what's known informally as ABD, all but dissertation in South Asian studies. And when I walked away from that dissertation, I ended up in sort of K-12 education adjacent stuff for a couple of years, and then decided that while classroom instruction wasn't really for me, I wanted to stay in the education field. It wasn't until I went back to library school that I realized that my previous degree could even be used in libraries. Um, and given that it's sort of it's South Asian studies is sort of a specialized field, I was able to turn that into a pretty excellent library job. I worked in as a South Asian studies librarian for a little over a decade here at IU, and then a couple of years ago transitioned into scholarly communication. So my work now is a bit different than a typical subject librarian. We do a lot of work around open access. We do work around publishing. We touch on open textbooks, open educational resources. We do a lot of things around big data. So it's a pretty wide, scholarly communication in particular can be sort of a wide field. And because I'm the director of that whole program in our libraries, I touch sort of all of those a little bit. It's really fascinating. It moves really quickly.
So my journey to librarianship, I'd say maybe slightly different. It really started because of my parents. My father took us to the library every Saturday to take out books. And I can't recall a time when I wasn't in libraries, public libraries, either picking up books or returning books. or reading for that matter. I spent most of my childhood reading something. I was always had a book on the go. I'm a sociology major, and when I finished my undergrad at Trent University, my mother said to me, "So what are you going to do for grad school?" I was like, I've made up my mind yet. I'm still thinking about it. And she said, "I know someone who's a librarian." And she said, like, "Why don't you become one? I mean, you spend all your time in the library." So that got me thinking. And it kind of made sense. So I decided to sort of explore what she had suggested. At the moment, I'm the curator of the Herskovits Library of African Studies here at Northwestern. I spend a great deal of time looking for materials to acquire. What don't we have? What can I buy? How can I strengthen our collections? What's missing historically? What's new that's emerging? How can I promote that or just let our faculty and our students know what we have? But in addition to that, my work also involves promoting the collection on this campus and more broadly in Chicago and anywhere else in the world. In addition to that, I manage space. I identify parts of the collection for digitization. I manage people. We're a library within a library. And so I have all those functions and then some.
Thank you, panelists. Our next question will be for two panelists. What steps did you take or questions did you ask yourself to ensure librarianship would be the best career choice for you? Esmeralda?
Oh, yes. So before I went to library school, I decided to volunteer. And I decided to volunteer because I was an international student living somewhere else. So I was living in Canada at the time, so I couldn't work. So I decided to volunteer, and I spent a summer volunteering at Statistics Canada in their periodicals department, and realized that everything I was given, everything I did there, sort of came to me quite naturally. It all made sense to me. And I thought, I can do this. So from there, I went on to, I then went on to enroll in a diploma program because I still wasn't sure I wanted to do a master's degree. And I wanted to make sure that even though I thought I was enjoying myself and thought I was good at this, I wanted to make sure that I really did enjoy learning about it. And I wasn't sure. So I did a diploma program in Montreal, and it was a 2-year, and it was part-time. I did it part-time because at the time, again, my parents were like, you don't have to go full-time if you don't want to. Just take your time and ease into this thing. And so I did it part-time. Kind of thought I'm good at this. I understand it. And then I realized that I could specialize. And that turned on a switch for me. For me, it was like, I can now marry this interest in books with a subject, which for me was Africa. I had been knee deep in Africa also all my life. What was going on the continent, politically, reading African novels, all that sort of thing. When I realized I could do that, then I thought, okay, now I have to find a library school that I can go to and do my degree in 1 year and also specialize in African studies. And so that's what I did.
Right,
Yeah, I think Esmeralda, for as much as I think we approached this very differently, I didn't do nearly of those thoughtful steps that you took in advance. I was like, oh, this is it. I'm just going to run for this now. But in some ways, I think it was the same kinds of things that drew me. I knew from my experiences in graduate school that I liked working at the higher ed level. I knew about my love for South Asian studies and what that sort of implied and what that could mean or could look like. So while I didn't do as much research into what what the day-to-day might be and some of those sorts of things, I knew that overall it would be a reasonable fit based on my previous experiences that way. Um, Ensuring it's the best career choice. Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes you also just don't have quite that luxury that you're sort of like, I need, right? I had all of this knowledge in South Asian studies that I didn't really want to go to waste. And I knew that librarianship would be a way to sort of move it forward. So some of that just kind of drove that decision, I think.
All right, thank you. Librarian positions are generally multifaceted. How do you handle all of your responsibilities? Meredith?
Sure. So, I, as a generalist, don't really interact that much with disciplinary faculty. Instead, I work with a wide-ranging group of people from across campus. So that includes the Division of Student Affairs, our Center for Teaching and Learning, and the writing tutors over there, IT, library specialists, our Office of First Year Experience. So it's wide and varied. And I think that I view my role, both working with those people and as a librarian in general, as a connector. So whether that's someone who's searching for information or needs, anything to help them with their research, all the way through who else exists and how they can help someone. So I like to say that, if I don't know the answer, I can at least help you find someone who does. And I think that's how I approach having all these varied and different areas within my position, is finding those connections between each. Because though all of those groups do exceedingly different things, and though I'm working with students from across the university, there's still these sort of really solid, strong internal connections that I think being a part of a community that we have at IU, or just any really university or school broadly, isn't always clear. And I think that being in the library helps kind of find space for that.
I really like this question. Because I feel like there are a lot of different responsibilities in my job, and that's one of the things that I like about it. Because I feel like it's kind of like a wide range of different things, from um, acquiring things, like evaluating, like a book package, like um, like an ebook package, or a database we might want to get, or something like that, or working with faculty like on their next book project, or going into a class to teach freshmen how they can start to do policy research. I mean, there's just like a lot of different kinds of things that I think we're asked to do as librarians, and I really like that variety. But um, but the how do you handle it all? Like, it can also be hard to juggle, and it can be, I think, challenging when anyone can just ask you a question. Anyone can just send you an email, and they don't know what else you have going on that day, or like you're sick or something like that. So sometimes it can feel like um, that things pile up, and I don't um, that I'm not handling things as quick as I want to. I feel like a lot of times I'm like putting out fires. The most recently, I feel like most of my work has been helping people who are completely panicking because the US government has taken down whatever information they were working with. Um, so sometimes I just have to like drop everything else and deal with whatever comes up.
Okay, thank you. What are some of the other challenges that go along with being a librarian? Karen or Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, I think Catherine was starting to speak to a little of this, right? That there's a lot of multitasking. I think people have maybe, you know, at a far distance, there's this sort of conception of like sitting at a desk, enjoying the quiet. And there's not really much of that in functional librarianship. There's a lot, regardless of your role, I think, in any of the ones I'm familiar with anyway, there's just a lot going on. Some of that might be because we're in academia, that there's certain kinds of things going on, but I expect public and other libraries are similar. We, you know, here in academia might be attending meetings with internal folks. We might be attending meetings with faculty or other students. We might be working on a committee with folks across the country or the world. We might be taking a few minutes to think about our collections. We might be taking a few minutes to do some assessment. And so it really, it's pretty wide ranging, and it can be difficult to sort of prioritize and organize yourself under all of it. And like most places in academia, we're also generally working with limited budgets.
Yes, I would definitely agree with what Karen said. It can be frustrating when you're dealing with a limited budget, you know, because there might be something that you think would be so great to have, and you can't get it for your people, and that can be disappointing. Um, and it's also just frustrating when um, you know, things that were once easily available to people, like the government data. I'm sorry, I keep bringing this up, but it's on my mind. When those things disappear, because it's like, well, I remember 2 weeks ago when that was easy to do. You know, now it's not easy to do. Um, so so there can be frustrations, because one of the things that might have changed over the years is, you know, maybe 100 years ago, a librarian was responsible for what was in the library. And now I feel like we are responsible for anything that ever existed anywhere. And so it's a big, it's scope creep, and it's a big responsibility. And so there's a lot that I feel responsible for that I don't actually control. So sometimes that can lead to frustrations.
Thank you. What have you enjoyed the most about being a librarian?
Well, I can say that I really do enjoy international travel. I really do enjoy living in other parts of the world for actually extensive periods of time. I grew up as a child doing that, and being a librarian has allowed me to continue to do that. You know, I spent approximately 10 years of my life in Southern Africa working in libraries down there in various different capacities. Um, and I met some wonderful friends. I made wonderful friends and had wonderful colleagues, and really was, to my mind, able to make a difference in terms of the communities I served. Um, this profession has allowed me to take on what I see as in some ways different careers. Um, I started out in periodicals, moved into teaching, thing I never thought I would do. And I did some systems, another thing I really didn't think I had the ability to do, but found myself able to learn what I needed to in order to become a systems librarian. And now I'm a curator. So I'd say it's allowed me to have a variety of different jobs and actually grow as an individual and find out more about myself.
Yeah, I really like that perspective, Esmeralda. Um, for me, I think working with the faculty and the students is the most rewarding part. I really enjoy hearing other people's ideas. I like hearing about their work. I like thinking about, um, okay, this is what you want to do. How are we going to get you the data you need or the evidence you need in order to move your work forward. That there's just something very satisfying about that. I feel like I'm involved in the research, but for only the fun part, and then I send them away and they have to do the hard part of like actually doing things and writing. Um, so I really enjoy my part in it. I also really enjoy the act of building collections and acquiring content for our users. I think it's a very like optimistic thing to do. You're building for the future. You're imagining this like future world of scholars 100 years from now, what they might want or need to use. So sometimes that can be just like a very soothing idea of like, oh, let's just build something for the future. Um, so those are two things that I think are really enjoyable.
For this last question, we're going to ask all four panelists to answer if you have an answer. How do you see the future of librarianship as a profession? Anyone can start.
Meredith, I thought for sure you were going to jump on this. All right, I'll go. Um, so I think like many careers, librarianship just continues to change right with the times. Right now, we're dealing with AI as a pretty large new issue that academia in general has to cope with and society in general. I think in the future, there's in my sort of neck of the woods in scholarly communication, there are a lot of issues that are in various stages of change, related to research integrity, related to sort of how we publish, related to the who has the money and who has the control over knowledge production. And I don't know which way those things might go, but they certainly are at points where we're continuing to just see a lot of change all around them. Some of that might be impacted by the federal government even very soon. So, librarianship is, in a nutshell, not particularly static, and there's lots of ways in which we're just also a part of the community and both changed by and hopefully change the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least where I'm positioned, AI is the number one thing that gets talked about, and is also the thing that I talk the most with non-librarians about. I think there's some concern over what role librarians will play as AI moves into searching or, the tools that can now help students scan articles and summarize them for them. I think there's a big question of how librarians can really take advantage of these tools in ways to help students conceptualize how they engage with information and how they work with it. I think the part that's most interesting for me is how librarians can situate ourselves in a space to help people really critically look at the tools that we use to understand the bias that goes into them, the level of environmental resources that go into them, all these sort of pockets of information literacy that really undercut every single thing that we do and every way that we interact with information on every day of our lives. That can sort of be teased out a lot more. I think the other space is libraries themselves. Libraries as physical spaces are becoming extremely examined, I think, from an academic side. It's something that's been going on for a long time, is balancing space for collections with space for open study. People who are not a part of the library are moving into our spaces. We're having to share a lot of those things. And a lot of people's everyday lives come to the library with them, right? Like they don't just come to us to sit and study. They bring their whole selves. It's an extremely high profile public space and people like to exchange knowledge, build communities. And I think at this point in time, there's a much stronger microscope on that.
That's really interesting. I couldn't agree more with what Meredith said. You said that very well. Um, I love the idea of librarians really taking a critical role with engaging with AI. I also am hearing a lot of conversations about AI. Um, and what does that mean for the future? And sometimes it's framed as in like, how will libraries survive if there is AI? But I'm old enough to remember when the those articles were about how will libraries survive because of the internet, you know? So I don't get too worked up about it because I like the libraries to me have a very clear role and it is very obvious that libraries and librarians can't be displaced by something like AI because our work is so much bigger than what AI is currently doing. So, um, so yeah, the other trend I see for the future, like Meredith said, would was is about physical spaces, and I think we may be seeing more moving our books off to um, a storage facility and making more space for people to come in and hang out and study and do other things.
Right. So I work in a subject area that is heavily print. And for years we've heard, now that everything's digitized, we don't need libraries. And I think, well, that's really interesting for certain subject areas. That's true. All the sciences are practically all digital. But the things that I acquire, whether they're old or new, are still very much in print because my collection does come from the continent of Africa. They're still dealing with challenges over there to do with water, electricity, just, governance and all the rest of it. So when countries are dealing with these sorts of things, they don't have the capacity or opportunity to even think about, the digital, because a lot of that is not even, it doesn't even exist. That's one thing. So, Catherine, you talked about space. So yes, a heavily print collection with a finite space. I'm regularly moving things, selecting materials to move off site, because as you said, right now we are thinking of how do we bring people into our collections? How do we bring them into our libraries? And if this means moving things off site, which will come back within 24 hours, then that's what we are doing right now, the Herskovits, in order to engage people with these collections, because we still want to be able to spark interest, especially for those people who are not aware of what we do, what our collection in what can be found within our collections. I've been doing this for a very long time, and a very long time, and I think it goes in fits and starts, and all these waves we have with it's going to change, it's going to change. And I will say, the more it changes, the more it stays the same. I've learned a great deal um, about technology that didn't exist when I first became a librarian. We were still using card catalogs, and look at how far we've come. It's just amazing. And I think there's even further to go, and I'm excited about AI, but I still think we will be here because there's so much information. Somebody has to help navigate all of this.
Thank you for those answers. It sounds like there's several social, political, technological, and spatial challenges that are not only, characteristic of the work that you do every single day, but also what we consider the things that shift or change or might impact libraries. So all of the answers and all of the things that we've heard so thus far seem to be sort of impacting on some of those things outside of the library, which someone earlier mentioned. So not only the work that you do in the libraries, but the work, things that are outside the libraries that are impact the work. But as someone mentioned, that librarians understand our role and we will be here a long time. So it's another good thing to think about when you're picking a career. There's a question in the chat, or in the question and answer, and I do now. We are a little ahead of time, and we can we want to just open it up for a little bit of discussion for the remainder of the time. There's a question. If you have questions in the audience, please enter them into the Q&A box. If you want to add to the discussion or the conversation, we encourage you to use the chat. We are recording this, so please leave your cameras off. We would like to post this to the YouTube channel after today. So the first question, and again, I'll open this up to any panelist. Feel free to answer the question. It's a two-part question. So I'll ask the first part first. Have any of you worked in or considered special collections? No, I think I'm going to go ahead and ask the whole question. Have any of you worked in or considered special collections? And what recommendations do you have for someone who wants to pursue archives? So anybody, please feel free.
I'll jump in. I have not worked in special collections in an official capacity, but I've worked with our special collections and from where I sit. And so I can tell you that I think working in a special collections library archive would be an amazingly fun job. For recommendations, I think just trying to get your foot in the door in some way, trying to get if there's a job there as like reading room coordinator, or if there's an internship or just some way to like get in the space, would be a good way to get started. I'd also say, since I've been talking about things like web archiving, is that that's a whole field too that I think is really exciting and could really grow, is for digital preservation. One of the things we have at the University of Michigan Library is a computer and video game archive. And that's a really cool space. And our computer and video game archivist has to know how to work with the old like Game Boys and Game Cubes and all of these things. So if you're thinking about archives, you might also think about digital preservation and digital archives as well.
So I'll just interrupt for a little bit, Catherine, because you don't work with the digital archive, but you do, or technically special collection, or but you do work with a collection that has primary resources that in some ways mirrors some of the issues that actually happen with special collections.
I guess that's true. I think it's special, but it's not officially special. So those would be like our older government documents. There's this like old report, the serial set. Maybe you're thinking of those kinds of things, Charmaine. And so we have like old reports that are from like, 1820 something, and they're old and they're crumbly. And so we have to think about those kinds of preservation issues of like, okay, can we send this to our conservation lab and have the conservation librarians take a look at it? And the work they do is amazing, like taking books apart, cleaning them, putting them back together. If there's an issue of like acidic paper, they can de-acidify the paper. So yeah, I do sometimes work with older things that are kind of fallen apart.
I think, oh, I'm sorry, Esmeralda, go ahead.
Sorry, Meredith. I was going to say that the Herskovitz Library does have general collections, special collections, and archives. And so I do a variety of work in all of these areas. I would encourage you to, as you said, Catherine, to jump in, to find a position. And it doesn't matter really what you're doing, just find a position and get involved. I think once you're in there, you will be exposed to a variety of different things. And as long as you show interest and you're keen, I think opportunities will come your way. This has, in some ways, always worked well for me. I did a number of part-time jobs when I was in library school. So I've worked in public libraries, I've worked in business libraries, and all of this, and I said a statistical library, all of that was just, some of it was volunteer, some of it was part-time, but all of this was while I was going to school because I really just wanted to know what really suited me. We have students' assistants here all the time in the Herskovits, and it's amazing what we have been able to expose our students to just because of the interest. You can see levels of interest. You can see students who are, and these are just really students from the general population. They're not even students who want to become librarians, but you can see how interested they are in the work that they're exposed to. You can gauge that sort of interest and send more work their way and strengthen their experience. So I would just say to you, jump in head first, find a position and just express interest. It'll grow from there.
So I have what I did, because I was interested in special collections and archives. And I found that librarians as a profession tend to be very open to wanting to help people. So I interned at a very small school's special collections and archives where it was a single archivist, had nothing other than student workers. And I emailed, she said, yep, would love to have your help, went and spent the summer with her. So I would say find archives, reach out. A lot of them desperately need help, especially on the smaller end.
Thank you for those answers. We have several questions in the Q&A, so I'll just start reading them off. Are libraries neurodivergent friendly?
Okay, I'll take this one. Except I have to say that every time I get asked a question like this, I actually wish that I knew less about things like autism and ADHD, because this is kind of an impossible question to answer. Possibly, yes, but maybe not in a way that's good for you, is like the best that I can give you for an answer. So is a library more neurodivergent friendly than working at Disney World? Probably, if you have sensory issues, for sure. Um, but so many needs around neurodiversity are vary that I feel like I would need to know more specifics about what your needs are, which I'm not encouraging you to share here at all, in order to tell you if libraries is a good fit. And having said that, if you want to email me offline and talk further, I can absolutely give you some more personal suggestions. I think a lot of libraries are considering issues like neurodiversity right now, which is certainly a move that's valuable and certainly not something that, all industries are doing.
Thank you.
Karen, I'm going to put your email under that question.
How competitive would you say the field is now and will become in the near future?
That's a really interesting question. Um, I have been on a few job searches recently, like as part of a search committee. And for one position, we would get maybe 20 applicants. So I don't know, does that mean it's very competitive, or maybe that means it's not very competitive? I don't know. Um, it I wouldn't worry about competition. Um, I wouldn't worry about the field being too competitive. If you're interested in it, I think you should go for it.
So I work a lot with the library students here at IU. And I would say that it probably just depends on the area of interest too. Some areas are kind of gaining positions where others are kind of being meshed or melded with others. So a lot of times, I can tell you public service instruction, we always have jobs. Other areas might not have as many available as consistently.
I'll just piggyback on what Meredith's saying, which is, so in my subfield, Scalcomm is growing, but um, there are other fields that I think in academic librarianship tend to be more flooded. So um, I've heard of searches, for example, for arts and humanities subject librarians pulling in 100 candidates easy. So I just think it varies a lot. I think if you have a background in the sciences, that can be useful. Catherine was mentioning things like digital and web archiving, things like that, digital and tech skills. Those kinds of things will really differentiate you, I think, in this environment.
I think something that Esmeralda alluded to in her career journey, location, depending how you think about where of the jobs are, that can determine if you want to speak to this, the quote unquote competitiveness in the near future for finding a job. Esmeralda, do you want to add anything?
I think, I think maybe I've always been overly adventurous. At least that's what my family tell me. So I'm quite comfortable thinking about different countries and traveling. I have no qualms about going across the country to get a job if I have to. Um, if it's the right institution and if it's the right job, I don't have any problems with that. I know maybe some people find it difficult, but I think if you're open to those things, um, you will find work. Yeah, I think you will.
Thank you. Charmaine, do you mind answering? Can people go back to grad school later in life to train to be a librarian?
Oh yes. So I started in actuality when I actually started in librarianship, um, I kind of was an anomaly because I actually, it's the only profession and the only career I ever had. A lot of individuals, actually, it was kind of their third and fourth career. So it used to be very much known as a graying profession. It's like maybe, I don't know, let's say guys, the last 10 years, the rest of the panelists can weigh on in this. It's been like maybe in the last decade where you now see, I don't want to say younger, but based on the question, I'll say younger individuals coming into the profession the way that I did as their only and first career. But you will find other people. When I was in grad school working on my MLS, there were individuals, I mean, there was one person that went to Harvard Law, was a lawyer for 10 years and decided that he did not like lawyers and did not like practicing law, so he was there getting an MLS. So there were plenty. There was somebody with an MBA. I think times are different now, but she kind of felt that the career that she would have, or continue to try to do when it worked, because she had kids. And of course today people may say, hey, go do that MBA thing, yay. But in her particular case, she was looking for somewhere where she can still work in business and use those skills, but have something that was going to be better for her life. And so she was also a little bit older. Um, there was another law student who, once again, had kids, felt like, this wasn't going to work the way she wanted to work, and she went and she got an MLS. In one of my previous positions, there was somebody who had a PhD in social work and had her own practice and shut down the practice. First got her MLS, shut down her practice, and went on, got the MLS and started to work as a librarian. So yes, you can go back as an older person and get that degree and get work. So yeah.
All right. I'm going to combine two questions. It's really about how to obtain a Master of Library and Information Science degree or whatever version of the terms we want to use. So, what does a degree in library science look like? Is the Master of Library Science degree shorter program than, say, a Master's of English? Is there a lot of coursework? Is it on site? Is this the best road to a career as a librarian?
Charles, I'm going to put you on the spot because you actually are the one that work in a library school. So not for the whole entire question. Like, but
Okay.
what does the program look like? I'll put you on the, and it should be understood that Charles is only, he works in a very good program, but there are tons of other different programs. So yeah, some programs are going to be different from, from program to program.
Yes, I think it's there are as varied as the careers, the sampling of the librarian roles that you've heard today. But I'll talk a little bit and try to be a little more general about the experience of IU in Indianapolis. I think the interesting thing about getting a degree in librarianship. So first of all, to become a librarian, quote unquote, you need a master's of library, you need a master's degree, and it needs to be accredited by ALA. So that is the road to becoming a quote unquote librarian. In the programs, I think at least the way we like to sort of start you off is to get an understanding, sort of like what this program is about, this event today, get an understanding about what is librarianship and how you might practice librarianship. And again, if you hear from all of the panelists today, they had different journeys to how they got to become where they are today and how they're in the roles that they enjoy and love today. And a lot of it is based on their passions, their interests, and what they sort of grew up learning how to do. So I think the library degree, the Masters of Library and Information Science degree does is help you in the beginning of those core courses figure out and understand librarianship broadly. And again, some programs are going to be more information science focused, a little more technologically focused. So it really just helps shape you. And again, like Africana studies, you might want to go that route. So it has the flexibility for you to find who you are and understand librarianship. And so again, in our program, we have, I think, 8 specific specialists, 9 if you count generalists. So you could just be a generalist. And I don't think you really need, as long as you get a master's of library and information science or information science and libraries or however it's framed, you can be a librarian. But if you know that you want to specialize in a particular area, then go towards that academic librarianship, public librarianship, archives, special libraries, tech. You can go towards those different types of areas and find programs that will help you align you to that area that you're most interested in. So I think generally that is the best way I would explain. And then I think be curious as you're in a master's in library and information science program. Be curious and also seek out other networking opportunities and places where you might gain experience, whether it's working part-time, getting an internship, where you can learn kind of on the job. I think part of that question is about on site. You don't have to learn it on site, but I think a lot of it is learned and understood in practice, right? So getting some hands-on experience, you learn a lot about librarianship that way. So anyone else, please jump in. But that's how I would generally answer those questions.
I'll just throw in very, very quickly and let the other panelists weigh in that there are nowadays, of course, there are the on-site programs and there are plenty on online MLSIS programs, so you don't have to kind of stop what you're doing and uproot your life to get the degree. And there is work that you can do online. So even if you go and try and get a practicum or something like that, you don't necessarily always have to be on site to do it. But the other thing I will add is there was, when I started out, there was a big debate on do you get a secondary degree or not in a subject area. And in the past, you can really get jobs without the secondary degree, but now, more and more when you're trying to hire people, especially if they're subject areas, you will be noticing more and more of them do have additional master's degrees in their subject areas. Not everybody, but you're seeing that more and more in the job pool.
I would just add that there are also lots of jobs in libraries where people aren't classified as a librarian and they don't have an MLS degree. So libraries need lots of people in all sorts of positions, like programmers, database managers, and I don't know, people working in conservation labs or things like that. There's a lot of people who have a whole career in libraries without having the master's degree.
I would also like to say that perhaps my trajectory sounds a bit strange, but I would say that I didn't go to, I didn't do any of my degrees here in the United States. I did all of my work either in Canada or the United Kingdom, right? And then came to the United States, to actually work at Northwestern. That's what brought me here. So when you hear of my path, it might be slightly different, but it's because it wasn't done in the United States. In the UK, the master's, the degree for library science is actually the graduate diploma because it's a professional qualification. So they use the diploma as the degree that you use or the qualification you use to practice. And then the master's is an additional thing. But because I knew I was going to travel with my degree, I needed a master's degree. And I needed a master's degree that was internationally recognized. So these were decisions I was making at the very onset of my career as to how I was going to, conduct my career.
I'll just throw in, just because I used to work with Esmeralda. I think one of the things you also did earlier on is that, when you were looking at the degree programs, you were also looking at what programs that were ALA that would be accepting those degrees in the different countries and where you would be traveling. So, and I believe you got like that information from ALA's website and things like that.
Right. I made sure that the degree that I did sign up for was a degree that would be recognized by the American Library Association, because some strange reason I knew I'd be in the United States at some point in my life working here. I knew I would be in Africa working there, and I needed to ensure that my degree was recognized. I do have colleagues who have degrees from other parts of the world, and when they came to the United States, they had to make that decision to go back to library school, in order to get a degree that was recognized in the United States in order to work here.
All right, thank you. The next question is, do you find yourselves conducting academic research and writing articles or books? Are there librarians who do that? And is the profession supportive of writing?
I mean, I think it is going to vary a little bit because not all academic librarians have tenure. So here at IU, we do. We are tenure track folks. Therefore, yeah, a percentage of our time not only can be, but must be devoted to research. But that's not the case across the board at all institutions. So once you get to sort of the looking for a job stage, that's something to look at very carefully. And it'll be clear in job applications. They will say specifically if these are tenure track. Sometimes they're academic appointments, but with similarities to tenure, but not quite the same as tenure. So you'll want to look at those closely, but those should be spelled out both in the job applications and during the interview process.
So I will just piggyback on what Karen said, where I agree with what she said, but slightly a little bit differently in the sense that regardless, what I've noticed about academic librarianship is that there is just a requirement to do your writing, do your presentations, be on your committees. What's different in what Karen's making a very good point is what that looks like and how it's weighed. So for example, my previous two positions, all of those things were required because I was in an academic library. I was in an academic library, but they were basically just put under the position or under the category, excuse me, of professional development. So it wasn't a situation where you had to do this much writing or this much, presentations or this. You kind of did have a little bit more freedom to do what you wanted in whatever amount you wanted, as long as you did the activity in itself. Whereas in a tenured position, it's kind of not like that.
I'm in
Karen,
a
I was going to say, Karen, what do you think? But Catherine, go ahead. I was going to, yeah.
no, Karen, you go.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, certainly when you're tenure track, there are very specific requirements that we're expected to meet. So yeah, I mean, publication is not optional by a long shot. Um, so yeah, it's definitely something to think about. I mean, for some people that's a perk, right? Some folks are really want to be able to invest that kind of time. But when you're looking at jobs, it's something you definitely should consider pretty carefully.
Yeah, I think that is great advice. I'm at a place where we are not tenured, and so I don't have the same kind of pressure. Um, we have a promotion system that has different ranks, but it is not like a tenure process. And so, going through the promotion process, there is some expectation that you would do some kind of professional development, which could be writing or presenting or somehow creating something new. But it's because it's not tenure, it's a little more flexible.
So in my previous position, I was staff. We didn't have any expectation for any sort of thing, but I went to my director and did say I wanted to do these things, and she let me. I wrote there. I was on committees there. I presented there. So I think even if you're in a position that doesn't have rank, promotion, any of those things in academia, we're open to it. We know that's how sort of this community works.
I would just add, public libraries are very similar. If you have the aspiration to publish, it's kind of encouraged some places, but you can publish, you can certainly present. So those options are there if that's what you aspire to. I am going to combine a question, or a couple questions here. Where or how and where do you find a library job? Where are they posted? And particularly with emphasis on, finding a job before being educated as a librarian.
So I will say one thing because the person who's asking the question is also saying that as we can see, I'm a PhD candidate with an area studies degree. One of the things that I will say, and I'm not sure all of the experiences with the person who asked the question, but a lot of times I think academics justifiably have to think about their whole entire future and the job market. And so I've run into individuals who are academics who are unsure if they want to be librarians and turn to librarianship for other reasons, and it doesn't necessarily work out. So going back to the earlier questions in the panel, is that you have to, you have to have that experience to realize that it is something that you actually want to do. I have had colleagues that have had PhDs and not MLSs and did get jobs. We actually had one here who left and went to another institution, and he was very, very good with doing collection analysis and very respected here and really, really did well within the organization. And he had a PhD in history, but he actually really wanted to be um, a librarian more so than, oh, I'm just going to fall back on the librarian stuff because I can't find anything else. So I think it's something that, whether you have the MLS or not, it's something that you have to really want to actually do. Even though Karen's story will tell you something different, but
Hey, I got the degree first.
okay, yeah. So then you did figure out it was something while going through the career. Yeah. Like, so fair
But
enough.
Charmaine's right. There are certainly people with particular skill sets that will hire as librarians without an MLS degree. But I think Charmaine's also right that you need to be thoughtful about how you're approaching that interview process and why you think you want that job, because we will be certain to ask those questions of you.
I feel like I've seen a change in the past few years in some of our job postings where we used to, no matter what, always say must have the degree, and now it's framed a little more flexibly. So like may have the degree or similar experience or something like that. So it would I think that is a great thing for the career. I think it's great to be a little more expansive. I think the the challenge for you would be explaining how the experience you have is is the similar experience.
I think this was fairly covered, but if anybody wants to speak to it, what education do you need to be a competitive on the market as a librarian to be competitive?
So I'll be honest, I think it's almost more important about your experience than your education. I think if you've been in a library and you've been doing the work, sometimes that will sort of unveil the education that you might need as you're going through. But first and foremost is actually being able to do the job.
One of the things that I'm always looking for when I'm in one of these kinds of search committees is like, does the person appear to um, be really like intellectually curious? Do they want to learn? Because this is an environment where we're always learning all the time. So in some ways, it doesn't matter so much what you're bringing, but like how interested are you in learning on the job, because there's going to be a lot of learning on the job. Um, but that said, I think like language skills are always really in demand. We always need people who can, catalog books in Thai or German or whatever language. Um, I think we mentioned like programming skills earlier. That could be really helpful as well.
I also will say, because I think a part of the question is some of the panelists mentioned early experience working in a library before studying to be a librarian. How would you find a job with the within a library before being educated as a librarian? So I was fortunate where I had a practicum, but of course I was already in a program to get a practicum. But even before that, I was kind of, Catherine and I used to have this, expression. I was born a librarian in the sense, once again, that was the only career that I ever had. And I started off. But one of the reasons why I did that is because I kind of rose through the ranks in the sense that I was a student worker. I went away to college and I got a job at the library, and that was kind of it. And then I went to grad school, and one of my roommates came home and was just upset because she wanted to apply for this job at the library, but she couldn't get it because she was a grad student and I was. So I applied and got a job at the library, and they were interested in me because I had previous experience. And when I was in grad school working on that first degree, the other librarians were just encouraging me to go and get my MLS and continue. So, if you're somebody that's already in school, just try to get a job at the library, regardless of what it may be. Just even if it's just shelving books or what, you just try to get in there and then take it from there.
As far as where I'll say ALA job list is where sort of like the biggest ones will get posted. I have found jobs on higher ed jobs before. I'll encourage to, if you get on those places, to look at job ads that are coming through before you're even in grad school or while you're in grad school, because that'll also point out a lot of the skills and education that will make you competitive on a job market. So I think starting, if you're going into a program like librarianship, starting from the perspective of I want a job after this, and then through those 2 years, developing that awareness of what kind of job you want and who's hiring for those jobs and what kind of skills do those hiring people want will go a long way.
Yeah, I agree with you, Meredith, on that. Looking at the job ads, looking at the skills that are required, especially if you're in school, because I think it also exposes you to maybe courses you should be taking, thinking about the courses you should be taking, thinking about the positions you might want to occupy. I think all of that is very helpful. Try and get in if you do have language. There are a lot of different departments that require native language speakers or people who have language ability. And you can ask, I recently just did a session for African graduate students. So these are students who don't even study African studies, but happen to come from Africa and are on this campus. And we were talking about language, and I just said to them, this is this cabinet here, and this is some of these materials we find ourselves unable to process. And one of the students who speaks Amharic was like, "Oh, I know what this is. If you need someone to help you with this, I'd happily do that." And so I thought, "Oh, okay, that's possibly some student hire, right? I can have him transliterate, right? And then my students, my cataloging department can take it from there. But that in itself is experience. That's experience that we don't have that you might be able to offer us, and it will give you a feel of what it's like to work in a library. So if you have those language abilities, it's amazing what you can do in a library.
I think the other thing too is it's all, I think we all, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on you, like as a panelist, we all are from R1 institutions. And I think this goes back to something that slightly, piggybacking off of what Esmeralda said, when you are looking, you just have to be open to looking at a variety of different places and a variety of different types of libraries, because especially with some of the smaller four-year institutions where they will actually put in the job announcements how they are looking for entry-level people. So I think just also being open to the types of institutions that that you're willing to work for, willing to get the experience at, can also be helpful.
I'll say, as someone who worked at a smaller school before coming to IU, it is a great training ground. There's only so many of you. I think there were 7 librarians at the university I worked at. You got a little bit of everything.
I think it's been stated, but I just want to try to make it clear for all of the audience here. With a MLIS or a degree in librarianship, you can work in just to be a little more transparent. There's public libraries, there's academic libraries, there's archives, there's government institutions. You can go into industry. These are just all of the different, like special libraries. Like these are all of the different places. So we're not like all of these and these different experiences and different things will prepare you depending on where you want to go and where you want to work. This is this will sort of your education, your experience will prepare you for that place, right? Like I think when I was getting my MLIS, I saw a job at the Golf Channel, and you could be a librarian in a and I was like, wow, or gaming, right? Like it's just these wild places that librarians can find work, right? So and I think getting the degree, one, the experience is, but when you go to study, is really trying to understand yourself, you understand your passions and aspirations and what you want to do and what you want to bring to the profession. And that'll help you navigate where you want to end up and what kind of area, what kind of place you want to work. Some people work in the public and love that. Some people work behind the scenes and love that. And there's many different careers in all of these places too, and just different specialties. So just to sort of it's been stated, but just to kind of wrap that up. There's a couple more questions. Is an American MLS good only for working in libraries in the US?
Let me just answer that. No, you can work in libraries anywhere in the world, as long as it's from an HALA accredited institution. Yeah, it should be recognized elsewhere.
Okay. What does the average work day look like for a librarian?
I guess I'll say, much like there are many iterations and varieties of librarians, there are many iterations and varieties of what a day in my work life looks like, depending on what month, what day of the week, which week in the month it is.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. If I was to think about it like on average, there would be a couple meetings, a couple committee meetings I'm on. These would be like a committee of librarians. We're trying to accomplish something. Maybe it's like changing some part of the website or developing like a text and data mining program or there's some sort of topical meeting I'd be in. And then there would be consultations with students, and there would be some time where I'm trying to buy books or databases or data sets, and then some time where I'm trying to get through my email. But I have some days sometimes where I have my to-do list and I never even get to my to-do list because of the things that come in. So.
I think those are great summaries. Um, this is a really somewhat specific question. And I think this would, yeah. I got a diploma in library science before obtaining my degree in English. I'm currently doing my PhD in gender studies. Do I stand a chance of being able to work in a library?
Uh,
Sure, I think so. Sorry, Meredith, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have a former student who did that almost exactly with just a different discipline and is currently looking for jobs in libraries. And I think what I've noticed from their career search is that if it's been a while since you've worked in a library, get back and work in a library. And that'll kind of be the key difference. And I should say, not necessarily in a librarian job at IU, at whatever school you are, get in just any position that gets you back in sort of the library environment.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Please post them in the Q&A. And we have about 4 more minutes. Again, we want to thank all of the panelists. This has been an excellent information sharing. And so we want to say thanks to you again. And before there's any other questions, are there any final thoughts or comments that you might want to provide?
I would just like to thank all the panelists for coming today and being so wonderful and talented as they are. And so thank you all for coming and sharing your experiences and willing to answer some of these questions. And hopefully we'll have some future librarians in the audience that one day will say, I remember I went to that I went to that panel presentation and you were speaking.
I'll say too, much like Karen, I'm always happy to talk to prospective librarians, current students. It's one of my favorite things to do. So always feel free to reach out to me. I'll throw my email in the chat.
Me too. I'll throw mine in there too. But thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah, and I'll say on behalf of the Center for the Study of Global Change and the IU Libraries, I want to extend my thank you to our moderator and panelists today for this really illuminating and frank conversation. It's really appreciated, and I also really appreciated the amount of time we had for questions, and I appreciate the thoughtful questions from our audience members today. It made for a really robust and engaging conversation and just really excellent. If you want to share the presentation later, we give us a little bit of time to process the recording, and we will be posting it on the Center for the Study of Global Change's YouTube channel. If you'd like to review previous librarianship recordings, we have them posted on our YouTube channel from previous years, so you can check those out too and see the advice given by our esteemed panelists in previous years. And thank you so much again, panelists, audience, organizers, moderator, everyone today, and of course our audience. Hopefully everyone has a great rest of the week and everyone have a good evening. Thanks again.